if you're bringing in a 100K investor, if the next week, a few weeks later, you're bringing in a 50K investor, a month later, bringing another 100K investor, those spikes on your equity crowdfunding campaign say something. And the audience that's in the awareness stage or consideration in your funnel, people who've been to your offering page, are more likely to see that momentum and want to get involved. Everyone's looking for that line around the block. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our December 2023 webinar, Checking It Twice, a founder's checklist for crowdfunding success. And gathered here with no other than Danny Shapouri, who's worked on hundreds of these equity crowdfunding campaigns, loan marketing initiatives as a whole, going to share how we've seen the most successful founders produce, the most successful raises. Did I say that backwards? The most successful raises are with the most active founders. And we're going to talk to you about the checklist you could put together to find yourself in that category. Danny, you've been here with DNA since 2014. Tell the audience a little about your background before we get into the presentation. Let them know where your experience comes from.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Started getting into the marketing space right out of college in 2011 and actually 2008, consulting around SEO. It was a hot topic back then, Wild Wild West. A lot of people didn't know the methodology behind it, but all knew that they needed to be on the background and ranking organically for certain keywords. That got me experience in the startup world, learning about budgets, how one budget, how to get to the next budget, and brought in our first Reg D raise in 2014, 2015. We're actually on our sixth raise with that client, and been able to really use my experience in that startup space, knowing that we have to produce one budget to get to the next, be creative and scrappy on the strategy and how we need to get there, and giving people their founders their best foot forward, speaking to this checklist on how to execute the raise, what to do in between raises, and knowing that that's more of a marathon than a sprint, but with the correct strategy, we should definitely hit the certain milestones that we need to hit to grow.
There you go. There you go. And as Danny's mentioned, we've worked on a high volume of these, over 350 equity crowdfunding campaigns that have collectively produced 9 figures of capital, have worked on many of the top campaigns of 2023. This is what's working in the background and what we've seen externally. We don't take credit for the success of these campaigns. We point at the founder. It is you who are working day in, day out on the product, the company, managing all of the moving pieces towards its goals, fundraising being a portion of that. We're just working as an extension of these partners to get more awareness, to get more engagement from the audiences that are aware of the deals, and to nurture those audiences to the point of conversion and do it again and again and again. So hopping into this document here, which we, of course, make available for attendees, have some titles, information for us. Welcome to look us up on LinkedIn. Definitely recommend you check out our past webinars. We go into all the topics in depth here. And to start it out, as I butchered, the most active founders have the most active campaigns. We have seen this again and again and again and again. So if you think you're going to, put one of these regulation crowdfund campaigns, regulation A campaigns, Reg D, as Danny was mentioning, that's where we started. We've been working on those since 2015. And the audience is just going to find it. They're going to invest. You're not going to speak to them. First time they get to the offering, it's going to happen. And you don't have to have any updates throughout the entire run. You are sadly mistaken. Statistically, you want to be speaking at conferences, you want to be on podcasts, you want to be announcing partnerships, you want to talk about new business goals that have been met, you want to speak about publishers that have talked about you recently. We're going to get into details. We're going to talk about shortcuts to all of that and how to really build a calendar that segments each of these achievements into a different week, a different point in your campaign. So there's that constant momentum from the outside. But make no mistake, whatever we're doing as an agency or any agency you're working with, any marketing team that you have internally, externally, you need to be hustling, to say the least, on top of it. Danny, what's the importance of strategic networking and crowdfunding?
Yeah, so there's a few different value points with networking. One, they say there's no crowd fund without a crowd, as you can see outlined here. Two, there's a lot of founders that I speak to that say they've already tapped into friends and family. You need to have, ideally, if you're looking to raise a significant amount in Reg CF, you need to have a strong launch. Stating that you've already tapped that family or your friends and family isn't going to help move the needle. I'll literally pull up Eventbrite, different networking sites, mention that, what about these next 5 events that are coming up? This is where you can build that first friends and family list. They can invest on the spot if your offering is live. The feedback you're getting from that audience is gold as well. Meaning, if there's a common questions that they're having, that's something that you may want to address from a digital front. The value of having that feedback can successfully, with used right, can look to get the needle moving on a stagnant raise. So there's events everywhere, as in the slide here. Crowdfunding exists for this reason, particularly Reg CF and Reg A plus. So this is where you're able to build that network if you don't have one. Again, get feedback on questions or ways to leverage that's going well in the race. If there's consistent feedback there, and really get that peer-to-peer marketing feel.
Yeah, majority of Americans live in major cities. Every day, there's an event in a major city that you can be attending to network at. Walk away with 5 to 10 cards. You're there for a couple hours, shake a few hands, everyone you speak to, walk away with a card. They don't have a card, let me find you on LinkedIn. I'll see Danny at events, ask for their email address and send them an email on the spot. I then take screenshots of every contact I made at an event. Otherwise, it's gone. Danny and I have been at conferences all over the world. You name it. Thailand, Hong Kong, France, the UK, Australia, all over the US, Vegas, Miami, East Coast, you name it. You get back after one of those trips, you're not going to remember who you spoke to midday on the closing day of the conference. It's not going to happen. Where you're at a conference all day, you want to walk away with 25 to 50 cards per day, per person. And it's an effort. It can feel strenuous to say, hey, can I get your contact information? But otherwise, it's gone. Even if you're handing somebody your contact info, even if you bumped phones, even if you did whatever with a digital card, you really need to make sure that you have their info. It's all in one spot for you. I used to use a card CRM. You can have an assistant put everything in a CRM for you. I actually like the reflection. I'll do it on a flight. I'll do it, before going to bed that night if it's a local event. Reflection adds more depth. You'll be able to remember it more. But the point of this is you go to 5 events a week, you meet 25 people, 50 people, let's call it, 30, for 4 weeks, 120 new contacts at the end of the month. I'll see these campaigns stuck in planning for 3 to 6 months regularly. When I say planning, I'm being polite. That's filing, that's administrative. I would love it if it was all marketing planning. I'd love if it was all campaign planning. We've seen Regulation A campaigns backed up for 18 months and commonly 6 to 10 months. So 10 months, 100, 120, round it down to 100, that's 1,000 new contacts within that period that you've physically met. And if you're doing proper follow-ups, and may I add to you, it's all of the follow-up. Most, we'll call it salespeople, you're selling securities, never follow up a second time. Only 10% follow up more than 5 times. Meanwhile, sales happen the 7th to 12th contact. Do a whole slide on this. We've done it on this webinar. So it's all about finding creative ways to build meaningful relationships in this business world. Whether you're golfing with somebody, you're taking them to lunch, you're sending them an article that you thought about, you're inviting them to so something that's popping up around the town, maybe for the holidays. You want to find ways to build meaningful connections with your investors, with your clients, with your partners. And what better opportunity than, meeting someone at an event and, finding the next way to continue the conversation. But when, as Danny's saying, when we're told, hey, I don't have an audience, bad sign. I mean, we've heard that and then seen founders start attending events, and in all different states, all different areas of the country. You do not have to be in, LA or New York. It could be literally anywhere, even if you're within a couple-hour drive, even if you're, doing a longer drive, but once a month to do a few days of networking events, meet new people all the time. If they know you and you have $100 to $500 minimum on your campaign, it's very, very plausible that they'll invest just because they want to see you succeed. They enjoy to chat with you. $500. Let's ride this out. Let's go. Danny's done things like that. I've done things like that. We find ways to support. I have a whole bookcase at home of authors that I've met in person, and they sent me a message, and I bought a book on the spot just because they reached out to me. I mean, it's a whole category of investors. Speak to anyone who works with startups, friends and family, first degree network. First degree network wants to see you succeed. They're not just looking at the exit. You then have strategic investors, ROI investors. Could tell you the pros and cons with each. The first degree network is ultimate. So be growing that first degree network all the time. Do not tell yourself, I've done enough, I've worked enough people. We'll get more back into your existing audience and how you're creating a crowd and building on top of it. I could talk for an hour just about events. I could do a whole lecture on events. This is where we've seen the biggest deals, the biggest partnerships take place. Danny, I was talking about it a bit. What are some other tips to harness personal connections?
Yeah, a great way and something that's a strategy that's very underutilized is LinkedIn. First degree connections. There's kind of a 2-point strategy in here. You could build your first degree networks, meaning this could be an audience that you grow that become a first degree network. This could be your existing audience. And the reason why the strategy around friends and family are so important, as Jason touched on, is they're not really focused on the return. They're not really focused on the business model as much. They're investing in you. And then those other investors that want to see that momentum then participate at higher levels. This is moving. And I know it touched on this on my last comment, but that's why crowdfunding exists, where before you had to be accredited to be able to participate in any type of funding at companies at this level. So definitely an important key performance indicator and a validator for your raise when friends and family come in at high levels. And there's some tools, there's ways to automate this. There's also ways you can manually do this. We offer it on calls with issuers. I tell them they could do this, whether they work with us or not. They could literally start that day after our call. You can reach out to 1,000 contacts per month, Monday through Friday. May want to do on the weekends as well, but on LinkedIn, you can target, you can do searches with LinkedIn Navigator where you can showcase different VCs, family offices, angels. The goal is to build your first degree network with these type of audiences. We'll usually see a 30% acceptance rate. We'll send a message with the invite. Something a bit personalized is great. There's pluses and minuses about automating versus personalizing the message. One is you're able to scale at higher levels. A personalized message is obviously going to show a stronger connection rate than phone calls. And then 30% on average, we see then connect to a call. A lot of no's to get a yes. It is a long game, but we've seen clients produce much higher tier investments with this. because you're not just going to show them the Reg CF raise, Reg A plus. The goal is to build that relationship over a phone call. And we've seen that strategy. One, is underutilized, so it stands out. Two, it's going to go much farther versus just say, hey, here's my start engine, a refunder, and a capital raise. Check it out. You can build that dynamic presentation with them on the spot. So you're gonna go much farther along with the relationship there, and it's all a numbers game. But if you're speaking to 30 to 60 people a week about your raise, let's say you convert 20-30% of that, you're at a better spot.
And Danny, you were pointing out you would stand with people, call them, and walk through the investment process directly.
Yeah. I mean, VCs, family offices, and angels, they don't typically always as common participate in a Reg CF raise. The terms aren't what they're used to within their investment portfolio. So you want to sell them on that relationship. You want to sell them on you. I've had clients to send them the link and say it doesn't work. That's the reason it's not working. You want to schedule a call with them. Yes, there will be a lot of no's to get a yes. You only need a few yeses without audience to show a substantial return in your time and effort of doing this. I've had clients get 280K investments from one phone call. Got introduced to another group on that one phone call. There's also an IR approach around this, but we don't need to get into that right this second. But yeah, it's very powerful, and you want to create that relationship. You want to create that phone call and go over it together versus just sending them a link. Due to the factor of what type of raise it is and what type of investments they typically participate in.
Yeah, and walking them through that process, you're ensuring that they're getting through it at the end. B2B, sometimes you're on the line, walking people through an agreement, some type of checkout process. We've seen B2C companies with that type of customer support. So, we've talked about networking events, making an impact at the conferences, whole nother story. Because let me add, merely attending an event doesn't mean much. I'm not going to say it means nothing, but it doesn't mean much. What you do there is going to dictate your results. And been doing these events for years, of course, 8 countries, as mentioned, countless, even this year in Los Angeles. Well, I probably count the ones this year in Los Angeles, but you see where I'm going with it. I will watch sales reps, founders, various types of partnership managers go to these events and get nothing. The same event, I'll see another founder do substantial business, bring on hundreds of thousands in investments. I have been at all types of different investor events. Of course, I'll see lunch presentations where millions of dollars is raised, and I'll see other investors hopping on and jumping in based on others' responses, and could talk about some of those dynamics. Even just managing sales teams and watching what one sales rep produces in contrast to the other, or even how many cards I'm walking away with and looking at other team members saying conference is dead. You don't want to you don't want to look at any event and judge the event. It's just a venue for you. What you want to do is figure out how you can get the most value from any one of these situations. And you want to provide value, not a pitch. People to go to conferences, to learn, to meet like-minded individuals. You want to talk about what you're doing in a way that's going to resonate with them. And people only care about themselves. They don't care about you, is something I learned in psychology. They care about the way you make them feel. That's how they say, hey, I like the way this person makes me feel. I like them subconsciously. It's a little blunt, but at the same time, what we're trying to say is speak to them, speak to their interests, ask them questions, get them talking. Don't just pitch them. Build a rapport. Then you could speak to their interest with what you do. Show that other people care about you and what you are doing. In the book, The Game, this is a dating book. They say, go to a bar and don't go without, speaking to a potential partner for 3 seconds, meaning you talk to somebody. As soon as that's done, you talk to the next person From the outside, it appears that you know everybody at this bar. The same exact thing is true with conferences, where if you're standing there, you're kind of on your phone, how inviting is this? Where if you're laughing it up with one of the speakers, talking to one of the exhibitors, talking to someone over here, they're all there to network. It says so on the slide. They're all there to meet people. As a marketer, if you're looking at the target audience, you're trying to understand what their purpose, what they're doing there is. So, figure out ways to fit their goals for the events and speak to them accordingly. For the investors, are they looking for deal flow? What type of deal flow? Not just the vertical, but time length, valuation, partners, clients. What do they want to see out of the founder? Do they want to see someone come up to them and introduce themselves and have a presence at the event? Or do they want to see someone who's kind of keeping themselves or just pitching everybody that they talk to? Build relationships, provide value, give tips, give recommendations, have them ask you if they can invest. And, when the time's appropriate and you're sharing contact info, if that takes them down a digital funnel to get them there, great. If it happens during the follow-up, I've heard all different types of references for relationship building that, you want to get some contact info, you get coffee, there's multiple steps. Don't just throw a big question at them the first time you meet them. Danny, what are some other strategies for visibility? Oh, you know what? I actually just went over this one, but maybe you could talk about getting involved in the event.
Yeah, there's different ways to build relationships with the event coordinators. You can. The biggest takeaway I heard from you, Jason, is how can you add value? No one likes to be sold. What are takeaways? So maybe you have an engaged audience that you could do a post to. Maybe they can send you a referral link and you can email about the event. Maybe they can get you a speaking slot, or get you a booth so you have an attendance and they're throwing your logo on the vendor or participation list, sponsorships, and then they're reaching out to their audience about you sponsoring. There's some great ways to build out that type of engagement and relationship, and the goal is to tap into responsive audiences in the space, and it's a third party validator as well. There's a lot of times I've referenced to potential clients like, hey, we're at this event, we're attending this event next week, maybe they're local, we can meet them in person. It creates a few different types of social proof, you want to call it. One, not everyone just gets to speak at these events or have a booth or advertise the event, so it creates social proof in that fashion. Two, we can meet them in person. Maybe I'm never in New York, but they're there, and maybe they're down the street from the event, so we can step away and grab coffee, even if they're not participating. So there's that type of social dynamic to it, and you know, uh, being a part of these events says a lot. So being engaged as a thought leader, showcasing what you're seeing, creates a lot of value for people, no matter what stage they're at in this process.
Exactly. And we have a whole checklist for content marketing, and how you can follow up. So as Danny's talking about, it's all in follow up. It's all about how you're staying the connection afterwards. So this is available to you as well with this deck. Please feel free to reach out around it. Am I back to full screen here, Danny?
No. Well, you got your picture on the right.
What do you see on the screen?
Post conference networking tips.
Yeah. So post-conference network tips, as we're talking about, you want to have it follow your content calendar. So if you haven't seen our webinars around the digital side of this, creating your strategy, putting together content marketing funnel, and then driving traffic into it with advertising and outreach, really say strategy, activating across content marketing, advertising, and outreach, would definitely look to put all of that together. Even if you don't, you should be working these things offline. But offline reflects online, offline contributes to online, online leads to more scale. But what I really like about these post-conference networking tips is you can see what's working offline, and look to incorporate it to bring far more people into that same type of sequence. So follow-up tactics post-conference. Got Kevin Hart here saying just following up. Always follow up and continue to check in with leads. Follow up with at least follow up in at least 48 hours. Keep a pen and write something on the card to remember. Screenshot their LinkedIn profiles. Already talked about some of these contact topics, but you want to craft personalized messages as you're doing it. Now, you can't follow up with someone you did not connect with at an event. Take full advantage of your time at the event. Find ways to connect outside straight business talk. Tie in a conversation you had. If somebody sends me an email and references snowboarding, I often bring up snowboarding. It's a conversation where, you think I could talk about travel for conferences, snowboarding, a whole nother thing. It's a common topic. Golf over the past couple of years has also been there for me. Sometimes it's a specific campaign, sometimes it's a specific channel, a tactic. If they follow up with something that references our discussion, I know they're not a bot. I know it's not just, a blast, and I'm that much more likely to incline, especially if it's about an investment. My primary focus is marketing. I think everyone invests to a certain degree, and that's why it's funny to me when I hear about this investor category where, really, as part of any, adult financial management, program, course, best practices, you'll find investments. Everyone's a prospective investor. So if somebody follows up with me, hey, I saw you at this investor luncheon, and they're talking about specifics with me, I almost feel a responsibility to respond. Where if it just feels like the same message they sent everybody, it's not priority for me. So, I get hit with a lot of deal flow. Everyone wants to pitch you on what they're, raising capital for. Now, creating a personal connection will help increase response rates and conversions in the end game. You want to get creative on the follow-ups as well. How about now? Doesn't work great. When are you going to invest? Things that are very direct, as much as, looking to offer value, looking to do something fun, looking to do something that creates more of a partnership, of a relationship, will attract the right investors, not the wrong ones, but the right. What's a good closing rate, Danny?
Well, in regards to like outreach in general, there's 30% on average we see as an accept invite. And obviously, if that's at an event, the closing rates, the conversion rate to a call is going to be much higher, or in-person meeting. 30% on average, then schedule a call from that outreach, from that connection. And then closing, can be looked at in a few different ways. If it's a Reg D raise, let's say higher minimum. I've had clients literally close it out in the first week. I've had some carry that conversation for 6 months. If it's a Reg CF raise, it can be quicker because it's a lower minimum investment. So closing typically we find, on the client side, some use investor relations groups, but the conversion would be closing can be different on what that goal is. If it's a partnership, it can be something a bit quicker. If it's an investment with a 250K minimum, it could be several conversations. And you want to use the feedback you're getting from those conversations to approach the next conversation in a strategic level. So if there's some pushback or something stood out to them that they liked, you want to constantly listen. Listening and getting cues, on what stood out to them, whether it's good or bad, can set you up for success for that next call. I'm constantly doing on my calls with potential issuers, and that could be all the way down to your messaging. I'm always liking to show social proof. So let's say you guys hit a benchmark in your raise, show excitement, show validation there. We just hit 500K. Did you see our last write up from Forbes, Business Insider, one, it's a social proof as the write-up from the publisher. Two, you're hitting that benchmark, and invite them for some type of feedback around the article. And you do that enough times, you should get someone to take action, whether that's giving you some type of update or just going straight in and investing. But that, they say on advertising or just marketing in general, it's 7 to 17 touches before an investment. These aren't impulse type conversions. It's a year hold minimum security. So there's more consideration. They can't return on Amazon in a few days if they don't like it. So the more touch points, the better. As you can see, it says not sure if 100 attempts is too high. There's never too many follow-ups that you can do. And obviously the goal of quality follow-ups does fall in there. But showing that any type of business momentum, raise momentum, and business momentum could fall into the founders. You are the brand as well. You are your own brand that then is raising on top of the offering. So you can align yourself with that. We have a client, Adam Beam, that sends us update videos every 2-3 weeks of partnerships, and we throw that in the retargeting audience. It shows the face, who they're investing in, and shows momentum, and it converts really well by doing so. So that's what I would look at from a strategy standpoint with the outreach, and know that it's a numbers game. And
We're just talking about the follow-ups here. And as you're saying, it's really that, game of you can't follow up enough. So weekly is not too much, especially the first quarter. Maybe month 2, you switch to every other week. At some point, you move to monthly. At some point, you move to every other month. I don't see a problem with following up once a year for 5 years. Literally, first year, second year, you start slowing it down more and more and more. But a lot of people are connecting with you just to follow you. Maybe you sell them and get them to further stages from there. But as Danny's saying, showcase the traction, the product, the services in real time, and make them feel part of your brand. Mastering the crowdfunding outreach. So now we're getting to LinkedIn. Now we're getting to these outreach systems on top of who you're meeting at the physical events and what you're doing for follow-ups. Danny was talking about some of the messaging you could do with advertising and content marketing once you see it working in these follow-ups. But in the actual outreach, you want to craft effective outreach communication, right? So continuously optimize your outreach strategy. Utilize the no's to your advantage. You're going to get no's. Didn't speak about the numbers game enough here, but if you're getting a 20% closing rate on, actual physical pitches, you're in a good place. On digital, if you're getting a 2% conversion rate, you're in a good place. You drive 50,000 people to your offering page and get 1,000 investors, you are effective. If those 1,000 investors are participating at $1,000 average on a Reg CF, that's $1 million. Paints a picture, you need to drive 50,000 people per $1 million raised, but you're losing 48,000, 49,000 of those people. They're no's. So utilize those no's to your advantage. Try out different sets of messaging, A/B test, look for the variants that are going to produce for you, not just by what you like, not by what you feel represents your brand the best, which should be a component, but what the data is telling you is converting this audience with this messaging, this funnel, this day and time of week, using these channels, that pocket of performance. We want to scale. We want to reach more of those, and specialize your messaging based on that target audience. If you can customize it further, I talked about some of my interests. If people speak to me on a geo-targeted level, if I see an ad that references an event that I went to or something that is clearly for me, let alone outreach. Hey, missed you at investment week. How was the panel? I don't know if this person even attended the event. Maybe they just looked at the speakers on the site, but because they wrote that, I'm now pulled in. So you want to find different ways to utilize the outreach for people you haven't met, that it's custom. What else works for personalizing outreach?
Yeah, there's a few ways to look at it. You can search their name. You can search on Google. You could search their company. Maybe they had a partnership or press release. You can then mention that. Uh, there's a lot of different platforms around their raise. Let's say they had a strong week. You can mention that using King's Crowd and reference the momentum they had and how much they raised and congratulate them. There's let's say it's a an investor that had a group they're part of that had an exit. Can mention that. Um, with digital, there's a lot of ways to find relevant content that shows one, you did some research, two, your message is organic, which should have a stronger rate of if your KPIs, phone calls or collecting emails. You can build that customized component to it. And it's a great way to spend a few minutes, take a step back, and really analyze your audience, what you're looking at, gain from them, and showing that you're just reached out to them to reach out to them. You have some value, and there's a reason why. And it's a validator as well. If I have a customized message that really speaks to me, I'm more likely to respond versus I had someone that emailed me yesterday and had someone else's company in the email, and it was about customized messaging around email as a service. And it mentioned he copy and pasted it. He had a different company name in there. Didn't vibe well with me. Where uh, if you're selling a service around that and didn't have a strategy around having the wrong name, it would have converted at a higher level in most cases. So it's a numbers game too. But yeah, having different messaging, as Jason mentioned, to different audiences, A/B tests, find out which ones are converting at the higher level. And you can use different benchmarks they've reached from business, but do a simple Google search and you can mention that and why it's relevant to why you're reaching out.
I worked at a luxury hotel line in college, and they had the utmost focus for personalized service. Show me you know me, anticipate my needs, wow me if you can. Those were three different categories. Moving up, they've had you in training for weeks around this, even if you're just whatever your role is, whatever your role in the entire premises or corporate office. Investors, we'll call it one of the most, if not the most premium audience you could be going after. Get as personalized as you can, as Danny is saying. Reference their wins. People love talking about their wins. Hey, saw you early in an Uber. What were those early days of white glove service like? Uh, you know, Town cars. It was the whole thing. You could always research this stuff and make it even more, you know, detailed and correct as you're reaching out to them. Utilize various platforms for outreach, discover what platforms your audience prefers and reach out there. For investors, I mean, we're always a big fan of LinkedIn. We think LinkedIn is underrated, particularly for outreach. If you're doing follow-ups, maybe there's some other social channels. I'll get follow-ups after a conference on Facebook Messenger, Instagram DMs, Telegram, WhatsApp, uh, Discord. I could go on and on and on and on and on. Some people are huge on X, formerly known as Twitter. It feels fun to say that. You feel relevant, like you're at the cutting edge, the forefront, just by remembering not to call it Twitter, right? But yeah, email, podcast. You could look for the best places to follow up. People reach out to me every day about my podcast. If they do, I tend to respond more. But figure out what audience people are most active on. If they're doing multiple posts a day on X, formerly known as Twitter, reach out to them there. Building a trustworthy personal brand. It's the individual that pulls the brand, not the brand that pulls the individual. People remember speaking to Danny at DNA, the Danny Niche Agency. I've heard a reference to one. People remember individuals. Just use the example of X. Who do we picture with X? Elon Musk, same as Tesla and SpaceX and a line of other companies, the Boring Company, the list goes on. Build a trustworthy brand for yourself. Talk about all the active, productive things you're doing for the community, and it will project onto the brand and the investment opportunity and the goals, the direction of the organization, and therefore the likeliness that those milestones are going to be reached and that position is going to grow in value without even saying it. It's feeling. You're watching these things. Build a trustworthy brand. Danny, how do we be the brand?
Yeah, so we started exploring CEO branding, I want to say about a year ago. And the reason being is one, they're the driver of the company. Two, you're investing in them, most cases as a retail investor, that you're not just looking at the terms, you're looking how active the founder is. One, they're the ones driving the company. So, we have a big focus on recommending issuers send us update videos, really put their face behind, do their own social posts on their own channels. It drives more credibility, more trust, and really separates themselves from the brand and showcases, who is the leader of the company. And I can't stress it enough on how important it is. As Jason's seen on the slide here, builds that relationship with the audience, um, separates yourself from others. All they have to go off is what's on your raise offering page on your social media. The ads are built to drive the content, drive the traffic. So that's what separates yourself. I look at your content marketing both for the investor or for the founder and the brand as the brand voice around the investment opportunity. It's really where you can hone in on why you're different, your reasons why to invest, why are you doing this? What makes you different than the other technology company that's in fintech that is all on the same portal as you. Um, don't look at it as underrated. Look at it as a way to really, drive higher tier investments, meaning a higher conversion rate, higher investment amount. And find a lot of groups just run ads and they'll have a post from a year ago on their Facebook. They're running Facebook ads. Picture the funnel. Picture the user journey. If someone sees an ad, they're likely to check out your Facebook page and they're going to cross their T's and dot their I's at a higher level when they're seeing business momentum, publishers that pick you up, really showcasing the raise. They're not, the content should be geared around the raise, not a product or service. You're not selling that at this point. So you want to gear towards that. And you should see a higher performance benchmark from one, the ads, so you can bring this up on your LinkedIn conversations. If you had like a solid post or publisher that picked you up, it's something to lean on in the IR relationships conversations. If you're speaking to investors from an IR perspective, gives you some tools to bring up, tools to use, and it's should be done whether you're working with a group or doing it internally. And it's the question he's raises either way, but this is where you can really build that stronger level of trust. Where if you haven't posted for a year and you have a raise live, it's going to create more question marks.
And people invest in people. So discover what platforms your audience prefers. Again, you should be doing a marketing strategy before launching any raise. We have the 8-point plan. You're looking at what other competitors are doing. You're mapping out your target audiences. You're understanding what makes them tick. We look at where they go online. We build out the creative, look at partnership opportunities and projections. But that creative, that messaging, that initial content calendar, and all on top of the audience research that you've done, you should know where they go and where they spend time. Don't go off assumption, go off actual research and data. The assumptions are often wrong. People question why we use Meta quite a bit because they don't use Facebook as an example, even though they use Instagram and communicate that to us. Facebook has over 1 billion daily active users. We're able to reach any type of audience there. We've seen massive accredited investors come from there, yet there's a disbelief that investors tend to go on Facebook. or look at their friends and family there, or ever, log on. As mentioned, everyone's an investor, even the accredited. I mean, look high enough in any company, you're probably going to see accredited investors. So, determine where they go, determine what they do, A/B test, as Danny's saying, channels, audiences, messaging, show who you've worked with and where you've succeeded. Individuals should be at the forefront of these companies pulling businesses versus the businesses pulling an individual, as we mentioned before. It's actually a concept I got from Ryan Foland on the first episode of my podcast. We're now at episode 136. But I would definitely check that out because he is a four-time TEDx speaker and communications genius. But you're going to want to determine the preferences that you want to test out and let the data show you what's continuing to work. And techniques for personal branding, you really want to become a thought leader in your space. Look, we're doing a monthly webinar. I do a weekly podcast. We put out an article every other week. We talk about what we're doing on our email newsletter every week. We're doing social posts. We're speaking at conferences, multiple times a month. Become a thought leader in your space. Danny said earlier, it's very easy to reach out to an event and see how you could get involved. Spoken at a whole list of different universities. They're always looking for good speakers. By request, I've spoken to elementary schools. I mean, you can find places to speak in your community, and that gives you something to talk about in your content. That gives you something to talk about when you're networking at an event. That gives you something to talk about during your follow-ups or your outreach. Be a thought leader in your space. Write an article. No one's stopping you. Publish on LinkedIn. LinkedIn Publishing favors articles. Publish on Medium. Publish on your site. Look to get SEO juice out of it. Host live events, your own events, your webinars, your fireside chats. Bring in a lead investor. What better way to show other investors that you're investable by bringing in a respected investor in the community? Bring in a lead partner, bring in anybody. Third-party validation is key. We see it in digital where it's all about social proof. It's also online. You want to highlight your accomplishments as things are moving on. Get featured in articles, podcasts, live events. There's podcast booking services. They'll guarantee you X amount of placements. They reach out to me with guests all the time. And, as a host, you get to pick and choose, and, there's costs for the guests, but, you can use these type of services. You can reach out if you're interesting enough for that vertical. It's a numbers game. You reach out to 100 podcasts, you'll probably get on, at least 10. But, maybe it's 4. Either way, you'll get on podcasts. Shouldn't use the word at least so loosely, but you get the idea. There is a numbers game. You will show up there. You could do a press release, end up in syndication if you've done the right research and are publishable with your stats. You could get coverage from there, but never stop. Sounded more like an inspirational meme at this point, but it is true. You can't put enough effort here. Even bad press is good press, and the frequency is extremely important. So we're going to talk about utilizing social media for campaigns. We'll see a hesitancy at points from founders. But Danny, why is it important to post on social media?
Well, there's a few reasons. Let's say you're running ads and you don't even have a post announcing your raise is live. It's probably going to cause question marks. And it's a way to build more credibility, where if you're looking at a brand that's raising and they're mentioning that Business Insider just picked them up, they had a partnership that developed and they're doing a co-branded event. They just hit 500K in their raise. They just hit 3 million, what have you. They have this many investors that came in. They just brought in this anchor investor, versus the other one had a post from 2022 that just mentioned Happy Thanksgiving. Now, which one are you gonna trust more? Which one are you gonna invest a higher amount in? The one that's showing the business and raise momentum. And this falls into a few categories that we've mapped out. Momentum. This could be founder momentum as well. Podcasts, speaking engagements, events that they're part of. It doesn't, and then if you don't have that, there's a lot of stuff you can write about the industry. It could be industry growth. It could be partnerships in your industry. You want to show that you're relevant in the space as well, and why you're doing what you're doing and why it's relevant. So you want to, as it's mapped out here, it's really going to create more trust, and it's something they can leverage in their conversations with investors, and should help out those conversations as well. But one, you'll see a higher conversion rate from ads. Two, you can leverage it again from a conversation standpoint. Three, it's potentially like a looked at as a brand voice around the investment opportunity, whether it's a brand, and then the founder should be doing this on top of that from his own personal brand, as they all funnel together. And just put yourself in the investor's shoes. You're looking at handful of offerings. What would you want to see that brand promoting to build more trust, to not only invest a minimum, invest a higher amount, and then bring their friends in as a peer-to-peer marketing.
And as you're doing that, as Danny's saying, you want to get as many people to repost as possible. So, Danny was talking about republishing from your brand. I like to think of a whole calendar where every day you have someone different posting about what you're doing, and then repost. Imagine you get 90 friends, 90 clients, 90 whoever, and each one of them has a different day where they're going to post, and the brand reposts. You then have an investor conversation. They're searching around for you online, and whoa, so many people are connected. So many people are talking about. So many people are mentioning that they've invested into this company. That's the effect you're looking for, and that's what makes our job as marketers easier and more effective at that. When we work with the founder who everyone's talking about, we drive ads, we do outreach, we're getting traffic into that marketing funnel, and it converts at a greater level. Conquer investor relations through your campaign. We work with great groups on this. Public Yield Capital, I want to give a shout out to. Variety of other IR groups out there as well. Say good things about many of them. Understanding investor expectations. Be flexible with your strategy to adapt to your investors' needs and values. Going into a raise, there's always assumptions about investor audiences, as emphasized several times. The data needs to show you what's physically working, see what's working, what questions people have, and how you can optimize. Do this offline, do this online. We're giving all these tips about what to do offline so your online performs better. And if you're bringing in a 100K investor, if the next week, a few weeks later, you're bringing in a 50K investor, a month later, bringing another 100K investor, those spikes on your equity crowdfunding campaign say something. And the audience that's in the awareness stage or consideration in your funnel, people who've been to your offering page, are more likely to see that momentum and want to get involved. Everyone's looking for that line around the block. They hate the empty restaurant sensation. Our instincts tell us not to invest in those type of situations. So if you're stuck at $20,000 raised, you're stuck at $120,000 raised, you are not going to get your digital traffic to convert at the same levels that if you're hitting 240, 500, or just have constant momentum. And every time an investor comes back, there's more occurring there. Yes, you're also going to see your offline investors perform at a greater level. Generally speaking, it's a rising tides lifts all ships. You get a spike from this investment. Now your advertising traffic and the retargeting running to them is converting better. Now the portal updates, your update on your offering page is resonating more. People who've received an email that you've done an extra $1 million towards your 5 million are gonna hop in at a higher percentage rate over the next week as a rule of thumb. So be understanding of the expectations. As Danny said, put yourself in their shoes, and be very intentional about what you're projecting out to them. What else can we learn from investor feedback?
There's a few ways to leverage it. and learn from it. We can, if there's common feedback, we do like a Q&A after every webinar. If we're seeing consistent questions about certain areas of the raise or the business, we then can address that through content and ads, so we can leverage it to higher level in a scalable fashion. To we can pivot the pitch conversations on LinkedIn or on phone calls. If you're getting common feedback on what stood out to them, you can then leverage your pitch, if you will, around that to focus more in that area. Or if there's something that's not resonating, you want to constantly be adapting to the feedback you're getting. And you're only as good as your last close, right? So want to be looking at it as a numbers game as well, but getting that feedback, you can make shifts. That feedback's valuable. You want to be scared when you're not getting feedback. That's when you should really question what you're doing. Any feedback's good feedback, whether it's what you want to hear or not. And it's on how you leverage it, make shifts accordingly. Similar to how we look at marketing, and Jason lives in this world. We do too, test, optimize, scale. So similar to your messaging, similar to the feedback, you want to make pivots based on that. And when it's you're hearing crickets, that's when you should really question what you're doing. Any feedback, like I said, is something you can leverage to make shifts ongoing to really crack the code. And you're creating data around that. There's data points that you can use to make your next conversation that much better, and be consistent as well. And this falls into all the parts of the funnel, the messaging from ads, social pages, content, portal updates, conversations on LinkedIn, at events. You want to constantly, number one, be listening, document what you're getting as far as the feedback goes, analyze your approach, and we look at ways to implement that feedback further to make shifts. And if you're constantly listening and not just trying to sell, you're gonna create a stronger relationship and nurture that, and people notice.
And that wraps the deck here. I want to leave you with the final message and, with the last minute here. We are available for questions. Danny can be found as Danny Shapouri on LinkedIn. If you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, please do. You're welcome to inquire through our site or send us messages anytime. But the whole purpose for this webinar today goes back to that first slide of the most successful raises have the most proactive founders, and what you're doing offline will resonate online. If you are bringing, a portion of the raise in yourself, your digital marketing is likely set up to convert at higher levels. The portal's audience, the FINRA regulated portal, is then primed to convert to a greater degree as well too. It gives us more to talk about for content marketing. Remember our 3 recommendations: content marketing, advertising, outreach. We could feature it in advertising. We could use it in the outreach messaging, and as Danny's speaking about. And your raise is just set up to be that much more productive. There are a lot of benefits around equity crowdfunding, including the valuation, bringing in user owners in some cases, otherwise smaller investors that can be ambassadors for your brand long term. But it is not, for the faint of heart. Only 10% of these campaigns, are really set up to raise 7 figures. 50% won't even raise 100K based on the data that we see on King's Crowd. So, all of this speaks to the importance of what bringing in those initial investors means, what continuing to get featured by press, by partners, and build new investor partnerships mean. And we're happy to give you more examples, more recommendations. I could tell you about Brad at Avadane. I could tell you about Tom at Life Imaging, Andrew at Rayton. We could speak to you about, Galliano at Boxable. Danny could tell you about Troy at EarthGrid, or any of these organizations, and what those founders did to be successful, how we were merely working on their behalf on advertising, on content, on outreach. And we're trying to give you hints towards what we've seen succeed. Success leaves clues. So test, optimize, scale, as Danny's mentioned. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. Please feel free to reach out. We'll be on the lookout for messages today. And if we don't speak with you directly, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, Happy 2024. We will see you guys all next year.